Okay, so let's dive in something I think we all think about and worry about, affordable housing in Europe. I mean, trying to find a place to live that doesn't, like, eat up your entire paycheck.
Yeah.
It's tough out there,
Yeah. No.
especially in these cities that are just booming all over Europe.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's some hope on the horizon.
Yeah.
The EU is rolling out this massive new initiative
Mm-hmm.
to try to tackle this problem head on, and we are here to break it all down for you. What could this mean for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's not just about building more units, right?
Right.
It's really kind of a multifaceted approach to how we think about housing in Europe.
Yeah.
We're looking at sustainability, affordability, and even new ownership models.
And to help us unpack all of this, we've got a stack of sources. We've got the official European Commission press release. This is announcing the initiative. We've got a detailed breakdown from the EIB, the European Investment Bank's website.
Perfect.
And then to give us that kind of boots-on-the-ground perspective, we have a podcast interview
Oh, great.
with an expert in innovation in the construction industry.
I think having those different angles is really key because the press release gives us that big picture, the political goals,
Yeah.
while the EIB gets into the nuts and bolts of the financing.
Oh, yeah.
And then that podcast interview, that's where we get a glimpse of, how this could really kind of revolutionize how we actually build and design homes.
Right, right. So our mission today is not just to repeat facts and figures. We're going beyond the headlines. How could this impact your life, your neighborhood, your future? We're talking potential game changers.
Absolutely. It's about understanding not just the what, but also the why, and then the potential implications. Like, are there positive and negative implications
Yeah, for sure.
for this?
Okay, so buckle up, folks. The European Investment Bank, the EIB,
Mm-hmm.
is ready to drop 10 billion euros into this over the next 2 years.
Whoa.
10 billion.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money. But what's really fascinating is they're not just throwing money at the problem. They've got a strategic 4-pillar approach here.
Yeah. And the first pillar, and I think this is crucial, is really focused on partnerships.
Okay.
So we're talking about the European Commission, national banks, and even international organizations,
Right.
all working together. They're recognizing that to tackle a continent-wide housing crisis, we need a united front.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't solve a problem this complex by yourself.
Right.
But how are they ensuring that this initiative reaches beyond the typical, big cities?
Well, that's where their second pillar comes in, an EU-wide rollout.
Okay.
So it's about ensuring that those benefits aren't just, concentrated in a few wealthier cities. They're specifically targeting countries with less developed housing systems.
So it's about bringing everyone up to speed regardless of where they live.
Exactly.
All right, let's get down to like the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
How do they plan to actually translate these billions of euros into actual homes for people?
This is where things get really interesting. The third pillar is what they call a value chain approach.
Okay.
So this means they're not just funding construction.
Yeah.
They're supporting innovative real estate development and even exploring new ownership models.
Hold on. New ownership models. What does that mean?
Yeah.
We're talking outside the traditional landlord-tenant box.
Exactly. Imagine like co-housing projects
Mhm.
where residents share ownership and resources. Community land trusts that prioritize affordability or other models that are challenging the status quo.
Right.
We're looking at ways to make housing more accessible and more equitable, and that's exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like they're not just building houses, but building communities.
Absolutely.
But you can't do any of this without getting the private sector on board.
Absolutely. And that's their fourth and final pillar, mobilizing private investment. So they're incentivizing private companies to get involved, which could lead to faster results and more dynamic approaches to housing development. Those public-private partnerships could really amplify the impact of this whole initiative.
So it's like a multi-pronged attack
Yeah.
on the housing crisis.
Yeah.
Collaboration, targeted investment, innovative development, and private sector engagement.
But I'm curious, how does this actually translate into a real-world impact? Like, what does this mean for someone living in, say, Amsterdam, where finding an affordable apartment feels like winning the lottery?
Right. So let's use Amsterdam as a case study. One of the most tangible impacts could be new financing options
Okay.
that make home ownership more attainable.
So instead of just building more homes, they're making it easier for people to actually buy those homes.
Exactly.
But what about those who are happy renting
Yeah.
or just can't afford to buy? What's in it for them? Well, the emphasis on energy efficiency could lead to significant savings on utility bills for both homeowners and renters.
Okay, now you're talking my language.
Yeah.
Lower bills are always welcome.
Right. And remember those innovative housing models we talked about?
Yeah.
Supporting those could lead to more diverse and affordable options like co-housing communities.
Hmm.
This might be particularly appealing in a city like Amsterdam, where that sense of community is already strong.
Co-housing does sound intriguing. Having your own space, but also shared communal areas, a built-in support network, that's a different way of living.
Hmm.
But let's be realistic. Amsterdam, like a lot of European cities, is notorious for slow, bureaucratic construction projects.
Yeah.
How will this initiative address that?
That's where the focus on innovation in the construction industry comes in.
Okay.
Remember that podcast interview we mentioned?
Yeah.
The expert talked about how new technologies like modular design and digital tech can make building faster, cheaper, and more environmentally friendly.
So they're not just addressing the symptoms of the housing crisis,
Yeah.
but they're looking for ways to fundamentally change how we build homes for the better.
Exactly. They're aiming for a systemic shift that could benefit everyone in the long run. But before we get too excited about, all the potential benefits,
Right.
we need to look at the other side of the coin.
Yeah.
What are the potential downsides of this initiative?
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
That's a great point. It's important to consider the potential risks and challenges alongside the benefits. And that's exactly what we'll be digging into in part 2 of this deep dive. Stay tuned.
It's easy to get, swept up in all the excitement of the new plan and the big promises, but
Yeah.
we need to ask some of those harder questions.
Yeah.
What are the potential downsides to all this?
Yeah, what could go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong?
And one concern that jumps out, like, immediately from both the press release and the EIB website
Right.
is this potential for unintended consequences.
Yeah, and one of the key goals is to attract private investment,
Right.
which is really crucial for scaling up this initiative.
Mm,
But could this inadvertently lead to more, market-driven housing solutions that maybe prioritize profits over affordability?
that's a good point. If private developers are the ones calling the shots,
Yeah.
will they be committed to building housing that's accessible to, lower and middle income families?
Right.
Or will they just focus on luxury developments that cater to the wealthy?
Yeah. It's a real concern, and it's something that the EU needs to address proactively.
Yeah.
How do they ensure that this influx of private capital actually benefits those who need it most?
Well, one way they're trying to mitigate that risk, according to the EIB website, is by implementing these strict criteria
Okay.
for the projects that receive funding.
Mm-hmm.
They've outlined affordability benchmarks
Right?
and are prioritizing projects that demonstrate a commitment to social and environmental sustainability.
That's good to hear. But,
Yeah.
monitoring and enforcement are going to be crucial here.
Yeah.
They need to make sure those benchmarks aren't just empty promises.
For sure.
And it's not just about, the type of housing being built, but also the impact on existing communities.
Right. And that podcast interview we talked about earlier actually touches on this.
Yeah.
The expert raised concerns about the potential for gentrification.
Right. He pointed out that if these new developments are concentrated in already desirable areas,
Yeah.
it could drive up property values
Right.
and displace longtime residents who can no longer afford to live there.
Oh, it's ironic, right? An initiative that's designed to make housing more affordable
Mm-hmm.
could actually end up making it less affordable
Exactly.
for some.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that? The need for new housing, but also the need to protect vulnerable communities?
It's a tough balancing act, and it requires a nuanced approach that takes into account, the specific needs and challenges of each community.
Yeah.
And the EIB website does emphasize the importance of community engagement.
Yeah, they talk about working closely with local stakeholders to make sure these projects are sensitive to the needs of existing residents.
Right.
But is that enough to prevent displacement?
It's a good first step, but it requires more than just, lip service. They need to provide resources and support to those communities
Right.
so they can actively participate in the planning process and really have a say in how their neighborhoods are being shaped.
Empowerment is key. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the construction industry itself.
Mm-hmm.
The EIB acknowledges that the European construction sector has been lagging behind in terms of, productivity and innovation.
Yeah, and that's another potential hurdle for this whole initiative.
Right.
The press release highlighted that the construction sector is facing labor shortages,
Yeah.
a lack of skilled workers, which could delay projects and drive up costs.
And the expert in the podcast interview is very vocal about the need for a radical overhaul of the industry.
Right.
He was talking about, embracing new technologies, streamlining building codes, and investing in training programs to attract, a new generation of construction workers.
He made a really compelling case for a more modern and efficient construction sector.
Yeah.
But, these changes, they don't happen overnight. It requires a concerted effort from, governments, industry leaders, and educational institutions.
It's about changing mindsets and investing in the future. But even with, the most efficient construction industry, we can't ignore the environmental impact of building new homes.
Absolutely. And that's where the focus on sustainability comes in.
Right.
The EIB has set ambitious targets for energy efficiency and carbon neutrality.
They're pushing for green building materials, renewable energy sources, and innovative design features that minimize, the footprint of new developments.
But those sustainable solutions, they often come with a higher price tag.
Yeah.
At least in the short term. And that could be a barrier for developers who are already facing tight margins.
So how do they reconcile the need for affordability with the need for sustainability? Seems like a trade-off.
It's a challenge for sure, but it's not an insurmountable one.
Yeah.
The EIB is exploring, various financial instruments like green bonds and subsidies to make sustainable building practices more financially viable.
So they're trying to incentivize the shift towards greener construction.
Right.
But let's be honest, all of this sounds pretty complex.
Yeah.
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
A lot of potential pitfalls, and a lot of questions that remain unanswered.
And that's why it's crucial to stay informed and engaged.
Yeah.
This initiative is still in its early stages.
Right.
And its success will depend on how well it adapts to the challenges and opportunities that arise along the way.
And that's where, we as citizens have a role to play.
Absolutely.
We need to hold our elected officials accountable, demand transparency, and make sure our voices are heard.
We can't just sit back and wait for the solutions to magically appear. We need to be active participants in shaping the future of housing in Europe. And to do that, we need to, delve deeper into the specifics of this initiative, understand the various mechanisms that play, and explore the potential impact on different communities.
That's a great segue into part 3 of our deep dive,
Yeah.
where we're going to examine some real-world examples of how this initiative is being implemented and what lessons we can learn from past successes and failures. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the EU's housing initiative. We've covered the potential benefits, the potential risks, the complexities involved.
Right.
But let's get down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
How is this playing out on the ground?
Yeah. So the EIB website highlights a few case studies that I think offer some valuable insights. For instance, they point to the Nordbahnhof quarter in Vienna, Austria, as an example of large-scale urban redevelopment done right.
This project transformed a massive area of former freight yards into this vibrant, mixed-income neighborhood with a strong emphasis on affordable housing.
Right.
It's a great example of how public investment can really catalyze positive change and create a more inclusive urban environment.
And what's particularly striking about Nordbahnhof is this integration of different housing types, from subsidized apartments to market rate condos, all within this kind of thoughtfully designed public space.
Right.
It really challenges the notion that affordable housing has to be, segregated or aesthetically unappealing.
Right. It shows that you can create a thriving community that caters to diverse needs and income levels.
Exactly.
But let's zoom in on the individual level.
Okay.
The EIB website also features this story about Berme, who's this young professional who found an affordable, energy-efficient apartment in the Paris suburbs thanks to an EIB-backed loan program.
Birma's story, I think, reminds us that behind all these policy goals and the financial mechanisms, there are real people whose lives are directly impacted by this.
Yeah.
For him, it meant the opportunity to live closer to his work, save money on his energy bills, and have a comfortable, modern home.
It's a good reminder that this isn't just about abstract concepts like affordable housing or sustainable development.
Right.
It's about creating opportunities for people to actually thrive and build a better future for themselves.
Exactly.
While those success stories are really encouraging,
Yeah.
it's equally important to learn from past mistakes.
Right.
The EIB acknowledges that some previous housing initiatives haven't always delivered on their promises.
Yeah, they cite examples of projects that were delayed over budget or failed to adequately address the needs of the communities they were intended to serve. So these lessons learned, I think, are crucial for making sure that this new initiative doesn't repeat those same errors.
They highlight the need for better planning, more effective communication with stakeholders, and a greater emphasis on monitoring and evaluation to make sure that projects stay on track
Exactly.
and deliver the intended outcomes.
Accountability is key.
Accountability is key.
Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately the success of this initiative hinges on more than just policy and funding.
Right.
It requires a shift in mindset, a willingness to embrace innovation, and a recognition that housing is not just a commodity,
Right.
but a fundamental human right.
Yeah, it's about creating a future where everyone has access to safe, affordable, and sustainable housing, regardless of their income, their background, or location.
And that requires a collective effort from governments, the private sector, and citizens alike.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways for our listeners?
I think first and foremost, this EU initiative really represents a significant step forward in addressing the housing crisis in Europe. It's a comprehensive plan with ambitious goals and the financial resources to really make a difference.
But it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
There are potential risks and challenges that need to be carefully addressed.
Right. And its success will depend on effective implementation, ongoing monitoring, and a commitment to transparency and accountability.
Yeah, and most importantly, this is not just a top-down initiative.
Right.
It requires active participation from citizens.
Absolutely.
Stay informed, engage with your local communities, and hold your elected officials accountable.
Yeah, the future of housing in Europe is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
The challenges are real, but so are the opportunities. And with a collective effort and a shared vision for a better future, I think we can create a Europe where everyone has a place to call home. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening.